So I was there in early '65. So I was there early in the war. And I was lucky in that I didn't have to sleep out in the jungle. You know, I had a pretty nice quarters in Saigon. So I was a 20-year-old kid turned loose in Asia. And sometimes you would go downtown, and there were, you know, real nice bars on the top of hotels with piano playing in the background, and it was very mysterious and wonderful for a young kid to be exposed to all this. Now, beyond that, of course, there's the war. But while I was wandering around, I looked in a bookstore. You know, they have bookstores and little knick-knack places, and I saw a plaque. In the military, there's a lot of plaques. You know, units have them, they award them to people, people save them. And there was a plaque, and what it was, I wasn't familiar at the time with Rudyard Kipling. And I know he's not everybody's favorite poet, but there was a Kipling poem on this plaque. And it's a modified Kipling poem. So I'll read it. It was what I saw in the window, and it resonated with me. Because here I am in this strange land about to enter my year in a war. So here's what it said. It said, "It's not good for the Christian health to hustle the Asian brown. For the Christian riles and the Asian smiles, and he weareth the Christian down. And at the end of the fight is a tombstone white, with the name of the late deceased, and an epitaph rear, a fool lies here, who tried to hustle the East." I think it was written way back, and it probably spoke more to the Asian continent of India. I think that's where he operated. And it just kind of set me to thinking, you know, this is early on in this thing. I'm a kid, and I think there's some wisdom in these words. So with that, I went to war. I flew helicopters, and sometimes you flew in big formations, sometimes you flew alone. And this is a story about flying in formation. And it's kind of a story about awakening, or a piece about awakening. So here it goes. I'm talking about our formation as we fly early in the morning. I don't have a name for it. Dreamlike, our formation gently floats, rising and sinking on invisible inclines of atmosphere, answering to rhythms old as ancient seas. Slipping through parted curtains of mist and morning light, we move like a fading mirage across this alien land. Below us, riding on wisps of smoke, life smells rise. Wet soil, things growing, dying things, ancient decay, perfumes dark and unnamed overfill my senses. From somewhere outside the dream, I hear the muted pulse of rotors, feel insistent life pounding in my veins, and come to know for the first time in this strange awakening the fullness of my existence. So that's the story about that. Thank you. So the next one is about kind of an initiation. It's a sad story, but here it goes. Something about free fire zones. For those who don't know, a free fire zone was a piece of territory where everybody in there was considered the bad guys. And you can shoot anybody you want to. Kind of a sick idea, but it did exist. So here it is. And you guys have heard this before, I think. Like boys from the hood, we cruise, looking for someone to shoot, proving to those who would judge worthiness that I have within me the courage or the darkness to kill. Below, floating on the brown water, an opportunity to prove moves into view. A single man in a small boat. He doesn't have the map that we do, the one that would tell him he is a legitimate target in this insane rite of passage. Adrenaline flows and my guns fire. The tracers slice through the boat, claiming his life and any goodness in my heart. I'm barely 20. Nearly half a century has flowed past since that day on the river, and the darkness I found on that sunny day is still with me. Something inside of me is broken. I'm nearly 70. Thank you. So this one again goes back to being in Saigon as an occupying army. I call it Occupied Saigon, 1965. Watch this, the lieutenant laughed, and reaching out from our truck, slapped the woodcutter's head. The old man fell, arms, legs, bicycle, and bloody saw into the ditch. Bleeding, he looked up, and in his eyes I saw the end. This is how we lose the war. Reflected in his injured gaze as in a mirror, we were young, arrogant, and afraid in our fine SS uniforms. So this one is just about something that happens to people when they're fired on with tracer ammunition at night. If you're looking down basically down the barrel, tracers come up to you slowly because you're looking at them head on. When they go by, they pick up speed like crazy. So this is called night missions. Not necessarily about the tracers. Rising like tracers in the night they come, floating dreams of death, slow motion specters heavy with their cargo of terror, gaining terrible speed as they pass close on their insane orbits into the dark. And the next one I think you've heard, it's about flare chutes or parachute flares. Long before the military had night vision equipment, we had to go out and do our job at night in the dark. It can be very, very scary. But to light up the area, they would have an aircraft flying around real high that kicked out parachute flares, and they would light up what you're looking at, and then they'd go out. So that's what this is about. We circle, turning as in a dance or a bull ring, the night darker than death. Burning blue-white magnesium suns cast insane shadows as they sink. An instant of vision, then blind once more. Ghost of now dead suns drifting in my dreams of war. The next one has to do with memory and sort of love for a machine. If you go to air shows or celebrations of the military, you find old soldiers who perhaps flew in a B-17, or they were crewmen on one, or they were saved by an aircraft. They have a special feeling for that aircraft. And most of the pilots who flew Hueys, the helicopter of Vietnam, have the same feeling about it. So one day I saw one all beat up on display with a little sign talking about what it did, when it did it. So I thought I'd write this. Don't have a name for this poem either. I didn't recognize him. Tattered and worn, he was an old soldier from a war long past. I'd known him when he wore better clothes, clothes that hid his private scars. Now, alone with his sign, his wounds obvious, in a faded uniform, he waits for someone to hear his confession. And I have one more. This one is about, it's a product of my little trip through the VA program to deal with some of the issues that you carry with you from these experiences. So here it is. Don't have a name for this one either. He carried the load for nearly 5 decades, a journey longer than his father's life. Finally exhausted, he dropped his pack to the ground, pausing then to examine and rearrange the contents, a cargo of shame and memories impossibly weighted with guilt. Rising once more, shouldering his pack, he slowly moved on, knowing the load weighed exactly what it should. Thank you.